The next docket before us is one that I am introducing, and at this time, I would usually call upon the Vice Chair of the body, who is Councilor Matt O'Malley. As you may have heard from earlier in the meeting, he is out today taking care of his newborn, and we offer him congratulations again. So at this time, I am going to call upon my sister in service, Councilor Braden, and ask her to take over. Councilor Braden, you now have the floor. Are you good?
I'm good. Thank you, Madam President. I haven't done this for a while.
I know, it's January 6th.
Madam Clerk, would you please read docket number 0984?
Thank you. Docket 0984, Councilors Janey and Mejia offer the following order for hearing to review the Molina Cass Boulevard design project.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilor Janey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Before we move on, I would like to suspend the rules and add Councilor Wu as an original co-sponsor, along with me and Councilor Mejia.
Hearing no objection, Councilor Wu will be added as a third co-sponsor.
Thank you so much. So I just want to start by thanking my sisters in service, Councilor Mejia and Councilor Wu, for joining me in this important issue. This is a racial justice issue. It's an environmental justice issue regarding trees that are along Mejia Cass Boulevard in Roxbury. The city had proposed removing 124 trees as part of their design project. I want to thank all of the advocates and all of the community-based organizations and the residents for their activism, for their advocacy. I especially want to lift up groups like ACE and Friends of Mejia Cass, Speak for the Trees, for their tireless advocacy regarding this issue and that project. I also want to give a special shout out to the residents who live right in that area. So there are lots of residents who can walk right down the corridor, down the boulevard, who have been putting up with a lot in the area, and their voices are critically important to this process. I want to thank them for engaging my office. I want to thank everyone for their partnership, whether it was doing walks along here to look at the trees and to understand what the issues are. I understand what the frustrations of many residents are feeling, particularly the long-term residents who have seen over the course of time so many decisions happening in our city that impact them directly, but that they have had no voice in. As a Roxbury native, I grew up seeing how the city plans and how that planning is not always centered on those who are most impacted. And so it's important as we move forward that we continue to lift up racial equity and environmental justice and make sure that the voices of those who are most impacted are not left out of the conversation. This is not the first time that we've been having conversation about this, this project. This corridor, for folks who don't know, so it's in District 7, this is Mejia Cass Boulevard. And it's important that we just even understand the history of how the boulevard was created. So if people who are around my age may recall, there was a fight. There was a proposal to bring a highway, the Interstate 95, right through Boston, right through our neighborhoods of Roxbury South and in Jamaica Plain. And there was a lot of devastation. A lot of homes were torn down, communities were devastated. And what was left was just this bare patch. And the boulevard is helping to fill in what was left. And it now connects 93 to the rest of the community, particularly the Nubian Square area and where Roxbury and South End meet, that border. So it is kind of this gateway. So we just need to understand that history, because that was yet again another decision that was happening to a community that was largely Black and brown and poor, and not really listening to those voices. Thankfully, we had activists who were strong and who made sure that that highway did not come through our community. We do have the boulevard, but we have activists who, like Chuck Turner and Mel King, who are around during that highway fight, even if Chuck isn't around now for this fight. So, you know, I just want to highlight that point even though that the city has withdrawn its proposal around removal of the 124 trees. And why this is important is because, and I mentioned earlier, this is an environmental justice issue. We know that there are high rates of asthma and other respiratory issues in this community, in poor Black and brown communities throughout the city of Boston, but especially here at Roxbury in the South End. We know that. We have seen how COVID has devastated these communities because of pre-existing conditions in these communities. We cannot take decisions in our city that will exacerbate those challenges, those problems. Removing the tree canopy on Mejia Boulevard would do just that. So right now the canopy is providing some shade, some shelter. It's cooling what would be a very hot heat island in our community. So while the city has put a pause on it, we know that it's still important to make sure that the voices of residents are heard and that whatever happens on the boulevard, that we make sure that the voices have been included from residents and that there is equity, that we need to make sure that if we're looking at traffic calming issues, if we are looking at how do we incorporate cyclists, if we want to make it safe for pedestrians, we need to make sure that those voices are included and that there is in fact true equity and that we are saving the trees. I've spoken for a long time now, longer than I wanted to. So at this point, I would just like to turn it over to my colleagues and thank them again for their partnership. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. I will now call on Councillor Mejia.
Thank you, Councillor Breeden, and I'm not on mute, right? Okay, start it over. Thank you, Councillor Breeden, and thank you, Council President Janey and Councillor Wu for your leadership on this issue. The past few months have been really rough on the soul of Roxbury. In July, we lost our Roxbury Love mural. And in recent weeks, we've been fighting against losing our street trees along Melina Cass Boulevard. But if I can speak from the heart, this isn't about just the trees, it's about the people and the process. To us, this is a fundamental civil rights issue. It is an issue about who has a voice in our process and who does not. Neighborhoods like Roxbury and the South End are already facing the impacts of decades of planning and zoning that have resulted in lower life expectancy, higher rates of asthma, and hotter than any other neighborhoods. As a body, we need to not just speak out against the removal of these trees, but to step into our power as leaders in order to bring people together to unite around this issue. We believe that this hearing order will do just that. We cannot waste any time to make it happen. And I think it's really interesting when we keep talking about including people in the process, it's usually the loudest voice always gets heard the most often, and those who are most impacted are usually an afterthought. And so this is really an opportunity for us to redesign and reimagine how we're going to do business in the city of Boston, and that is leading with the voices of the people who right now are trying to stand up and be heard. And so really looking forward to bringing this issue to light. I'm not going to go on and on and on and on because you know I will, but I will say one last thing as it relates to climate justice is that when I first entered this arena, you know, everybody was talking about climate justice and the mayor's 30,000 page report around climate justice. And as a parent and as a woman of color living in the hood, you know, issues of climate justice was really not something that I thought about because I really didn't see how it impacted me on an everyday basis. But what I have come to learn over the last 18 months is that it is deeply rooted in what is impacting communities of color. And what we need to do is shift the narrative and making sure that people of color understand how heat wave and not having trees can help, well, in many ways, increase violence in our neighborhoods, right? There's a deep correlation around that. And if we don't have green space for us to be able to breathe and enjoy, that's going to impact the quality of life. So don't get it twisted. Issues of environmental justice impacts communities of color. And we just need to ensure that we're leading in ways that includes us in those conversations. And I think this public hearing will do just that. And it's going to be incumbent upon us as the co-sponsors of this hearing order to ensure that when we do host this hearing, we're leading with the voices of the people who are directly impacted. And that is my advocacy. I'm making sure that it's public testimony first and then everybody else. I'm just putting it out there, something for you to consider. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia. I will now call on Councillor Wu. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm just going to apologize in advance. It's very loud over here. I got kicked out of the quietest spot in the house so Blaze could use the room to be on his Meet the Teacher Zoom. So there'll be lots of noise. I just want to say thank you to the sponsors, Council President Janey and Councillor Mejia for including me on this. As has already been noted, there's been nearly a decade of activism coming out of community to say this does not represent the best plan for the health, the safety, the empowerment of communities of color, and particularly Black and Brown residents who live in Roxbury, who have been fighting this fight for a long time. I just want to note that it's a very significant development that's happened. This is the first time in that whole 9+ years that the city has said we are willing to reconsider and go back to the drawing table. However, there still have not been clear commitments made as to what a new plan would look like, what it must include as a baseline, and who will be at the table to be part of designing that new plan. So I'm very excited that our hearing could help be a platform to ensure that some of those commitments around process and goals or values are just solidified. And then the last thing I want to say is that this has also been 9 years of pitting advocates against each other, right? And that is just not acceptable to say that we can only choose one or the other. We can only have either a safe street where there's room for a bike path and for pedestrians to walk more safely, or a cool, safer public open space with trees, right? It is not one or the other. We need to be a city that is able to give residents everything that they need and that they deserve, particularly in environmental justice communities, particularly in Black and Brown communities. And so we will have a redesign that doesn't just save trees and save lives, but also really emphasizes street safety. And we need to make sure that both are part of this conversation together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wu. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this issue, on this docket? Okay. Is there anyone who would like to add their name? Councillor Campbell, Councillor Isabi George, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Arroyo, Councillor Bach, Councillor Flaherty. See who else? Councillor Edwards, and please add my name also. Thank you, everyone. I will now hand the chair back to Madam President.
Could you just assign that to a committee?
Oh,
I'm sorry, Councilor Braden, if you would just assign that to a committee and then I'll take the chair
That
back.
will be assigned to the, which committee is it going to? Is it Environment or is it?
Planning and Development.
Going to Planning Development.
Planning and Development. Okay, that docket, docket
0984.
0983 will be assigned to the Committee for Planning.
0984.
0984 will be assigned to the Committee for Planning and Development. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you so much, Councilor Braden. That was wonderful.